All right, so we are still in Moonlighter. I've done a few things, went around, got some potions, made some decisions about my armor. I did those off camera because I didn't think anybody would want to see, but we're going to come back in. You should check out the first video if you want to get a general understanding of the general process of classical conditioning and operant conditioning. You can also check out my video on Hades if you want a lot of detail on operant conditioning. But now we're going to go into the detail of the language of classical conditioning and then look at some examples of classical and operant conditioning here in Moonlighter and talk about how they're different from each other. Because as I mentioned at the tail end of my last video, as I was reading up on examples of classical conditioning in video games, in previous writings on video games, in the various locations, there was a lot of confusion that seemed to be coming up between classical and operant conditioning. Folks were starting to talk about classical conditioning and then giving examples of operant conditioning. So I think it's important that we understand the distinction between the two, even though they can sometimes occur at the same time, right? Because life is complex like that. No, you may not. No, stop it. Apparently you may. So we do definitely want to make that distinction between the two. So now I gotta remember what to do with this grabby hand. Nope. So again, we'll watch this grabby hand. We'll see how the grabby hand behaves. What we're looking for is that subtle tell. In fact, I'm not gonna kill it for a second. So if we watch the grabby hand for just a second, it's going to slightly change the way that it's bopping. So it bops around, boppy, 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 bop, bop, bop. But then it pauses slightly right before it goes to punch me. And so if I were to stand under it, when it pauses slightly, I would get hit. And I don't want to get hit. Now, because I am actively looking for that, I can notice it and I don't have to use conditioning to learn about that. But if I were just playing the game without being as mindful of such things as I am, I would have to learn that through conditioning. They are like moths. Moths to the flame, I tell you. These adventurers, so many attracted to the dungeons, so many to only feel the burn. Luckily, if you pass out in the dungeon from exhaustion or pain, it spits you out, eventually. It's a messy ordeal. Nobody really knows what happens. But one eventually wakes up outside the dungeons with only a small traces of slime nearby and, well, any injuries they may have accumulated inside. Yes, some have left the dungeons to never return, but plenty have stuck it out. Many enjoy the thrill of the fight, many looking for that big payday. There really is much more to these dungeons, though. Except then you lose your stuff. And that's why I'm here, is for stuff. So yeah, so if I wasn't playing as mindfully, and in fact when I first played the game and didn't play as mindfully, I wasn't necessarily actively trying to figure out what is it that I'm noticing. And in fact, I had to stand there for a quick second and watch and say, what is it that I was noticing that allowed me to know I was about to get hit? And that is what you're looking for. That's what you're being conditioned by. So let's use that example because it's one that we've just seen. Let's use that example and talk about, these guys. Let's use that example and talk about the language of classical conditioning. So, as I mentioned, the first thing that we want to do, and oh, look, the world provides, get off of me. The world provides another example of it. First, we want to identify the reflex response. And as we're playing this game, the reflex response is the same. I'm going to get hit and I'm going to get annoyed because I don't want to lose HP. Then you have the previously neutral response, the change in bopping. Until I learn that that change in bopping matters, that slight hiccup in the way that he's bouncing matters, until I learn that change in bopping is neutral. It doesn't tell me anything about whether or not I'm going to feel annoyed. Right? And that's what we're interested in. It's neutral relative to that outcome, feeling annoyed. That's the outcome that we're interested in. That's the response that we're interested in. And when we talk about classical conditioning, what we're talking about are stimuli or a stimulus. So stimulus is singular, stimuli is plural. So we're talking about stimuli and we're talking about responses. And so we have the response of feeling annoyed, and we have the stimulus of, well, first, getting hit. Or losing HP, I guess. Because if I got hit and didn't lose HP, I wouldn't feel annoyed. So it's really the losing of HP that makes me feel annoyed. Getting hit is a classically conditioned response in this game, right? Because getting hit in real life is what causes pain, but getting hit in this game is only aversive because it leads to losing HP. And so really it's the losing HP that's causing the response. So then I have my previously neutral stimulus. So now I've identified another stimulus, and that stimulus is the bouncing of that hand, that slight hiccup that we see. And we can find it with this guy too. The slight sort of changing of the, it's almost like a thrusting of the hips. It's like an Elvis pot. Okay, now. This is going to destroy an artifact in that direction, so we're going to put this over here. This is going to destroy an artifact in that direction, so we're going to put this over here. That's going to destroy an artifact in that direction, so we're going to put this here and put that there. Why can't I place this down? I don't have enough space to place this down, that's why. Hold on. Can I put this? No. Yes, I can. Okay, I have come to a point where I'm running out of space in my inventory. That's cool. So I might actually leave soon. No, why? There we go. I'm going to leave the next time I run out of HP. Because I'm running out of space in my inventory anyway. So we found our neutral stimulus. That slight bouncing of the hand is a previously neutral stimulus. And then we found our reflex responses. Did that sparkle? Let's find out. It did sparkle. What's down here? An empty chest. Wait, is this one of those chests that sends my stuff home? Am I remembering this correctly? I hope so. Yes! Excellent. That's exactly what I needed. I slightly remember that. So that chest sent all my... Oh, good. That chest sent all my stuff home so that I can keep going. Yay! So once we have identified a neutral stimulus, and if we're intentionally trying to classically condition somebody, we have to identify a neutral stimulus, something that doesn't produce the conditioned response, the one that we're interested in. And then we identify something that does produce the response that we're interested in by reflex, right? That reflexively creates that response. And then, oh, I did a good job. We're going to try the next level. And once we have a neutral stimulus that doesn't produce that reflex response, and a stimulus that does, what we do is we pair them. So you could, as many times as you really want, you could present the stimulus that does produce that response, and it'll continuously produce that response, right? Because it's a reflex, and that's what it does. If I continuously throw a punch towards your face, you will continue to flinch because you don't want punches to hit you in the face. That's just how those reflexes work. And you could choose, in some instances, to try to actively suppress that reflex, but the fact of the matter is, first of all, some of us are really bad at suppressing reflexes. And second of all, you are actively then suppressing it. So we've got this bouncy. So what we end up having to do to learn this association is to do the bouncy, then pound down, lose the HP. Do the bouncy, we pound down, we lose the HP. And we engage in that association, that repeated pairing between the neutral stimulus and the reflexive stimulus. And so that the bouncy, that's a previously neutral stimulus, and then there we go. The bouncing and then the feeling annoyed, these are called unconditioned. The term conditioning, that's another fancy word for saying learning. And conditioned is a fancy way for saying learned. And because it's a reflex response, in this situation, I didn't have to learn to be annoyed when I lost HP. That's just a thing that happened. I'm just annoyed when I lose HP. It's not a thing that I had to learn in this situation. And that's why it's considered unlearned or unconditioned, because in this situation, I didn't have to create that association between losing HP and feeling annoyed. And remember, feeling annoyed is the response that we're interested in this example, is that feeling of annoyance. And so since I didn't have to learn it, it's unconditioned or not learned. That's where the term conditioned comes from. Oh, rolly ball, that's right. Make you dizzy, smack, 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 smack. Okay, good. I am stuck in here until I deal with you guys. Remember, these are the guys that telegraph that they're going to hit me by... But I can't really adequately deal with them. Dang it! In close quarters. Bugger. Look at all the cool stuff. Oh, but I had the chest previously. That's alright. That's cool, at least. Now, we don't tend to learn these things in just one go. You can, but we don't tend to. How come I didn't... Didn't he say I was going to show up to town with all of my previous injuries? I don't appear injured. Oh, well. Can I upgrade my shop at all? I can add more tables, cheap sale box, a better cash register, comfortable bed, no, small chest. Let's get a better cash register. Yes. Thank you. That seems good. Tip me! And let's not sell this because that's what I wanted to save. There we go. And if I remember what that chest did... Okay, good. All my stuff. Excellent. That's what I wanted to see. What else was I saving? Alright. So now we have our neutral stimulus, our unconditioned stimulus, and our unconditioned response. And when we're trying to use that for learning, we need to take the neutral stimulus and have it predict the unconditioned stimulus, just like lightning predicted thunder. Right? So lightning was a neutral stimulus. It predicted the unconditioned stimulus of thunder, which produced a unconditioned response of fear. All right. Paper, shiny thing, seed-looking thing. Paper, shiny thing, seed-looking thing. After we have created these associations or engaged in this process repeatedly, we then will have learned the association. And you know that the association has been learned when you start to see that unconditioned response. When you start to see annoyance in response not to getting hit, but in response to, and therefore the dodge, right? What you're really interested in is the behavior of the dodge. When we start to see the dodge not in response to getting hit, but rather in response to in response to the change in movement, that kind of jumping behavior instead. And that's what we're interested in finding, is when we start seeing that. And once we've done that, conditioning is over. We have learned the association and now can call this a learned response. It is a conditioned behavior or a conditioned response. Once that happens, that change in bouncing is no longer neutral. Remember, it was only neutral when it didn't lead to annoyance or when it didn't lead to dodging, right? Getting hit can lead to dodging when it didn't lead to that dodge response. Once it's no longer neutral, we need something else to call it, right? We don't want to just call it nothing. So we need something else that we're going to call it. And what we call it is a conditioned stimulus. Now, it's a stimulus that we have learned to respond to, rather than one that we haven't learned to respond to. And so now we have a conditioned stimulus that we can respond to. And are these popular now? Whoopsie, that's not what I wanted to do. Are we back to them being neutral? Okay, good. Now I can try to price these properly again. There we go. So now we have our conditioned stimulus that we have learned to respond to. That's the change in bouncing behavior, creating a conditioned response of annoyance or dodging. So now classical conditioning has happened. And really, it's, if we think about the next set of responses, we feel annoyed, right? The reason we dodge when all of this happens is that we feel annoyed that we've been hit, and so we engage in a dodging type behavior in order to avoid getting hit, right? That's why we engage in the dodging behavior. Well, what is that? That starts to bleed into operant conditioning. So that's our classically conditioned response. And one of the things that gets really confusing when you ask a student, for example, on a test, give me the answers that are associated with classical conditioning. If I were to say, take this example and tell me what are the neutral stimulus, what's the conditioned and unconditioned stimulus, what's the conditioned and unconditioned response, is that the conditioned response and the unconditioned response are the same thing, right? They're the same behavior or the same emotional reaction. The only thing that changes is what triggered them. It's a conditioned response if it was triggered by that change in bouncing within the hand, because that's something that we didn't previously know, or that didn't naturally create some sort of change within me. And it's unconditioned if it happened because I got hit. But it's the same basic answer, and that can get really confusing for students. Hey, the tank, I love Moonlighter too, and I think it's pretty awesome. If you have Game Pass, it's on there right now. And that gave me some time to play it while I was talking about classical and operant conditioning. I'm going to run out of things to sell soon. I don't want to sell any of these, though, so I'm not going to. How do I tell what time of day it is? Like, how do I tell when my shop is going to close? Oh, I see. The sunshine's going down at the bottom. Fantastic. And the tank, if you love Moonlighter, and I'm going to try to remember to put this card in too. For those of you who love Moonlighter and want to see some more good Moonlighter action, Red Fighter 3 has a Moonlighter video. I linked it in my first video, and I will try to remember to put a card here as well, so that folks can see more Moonlighter action with someone who's talking about the game instead of somebody who's talking about psychology in games in general. Come on, sell, and give me tips. Give me all your money, people! So you can check that out over on Red Fighter's channel. And that's part of what reminded me of this game, and that I could use this game for this particular application, which is good. So let's think of, let's talk about one other example of classical conditioning in this game. We use the sort of red bobby hands, and when we go back into the dungeon, I'll do another example. So then how is that different from operant conditioning? So in classical conditioning, the bouncing of the red hand predicted that I was going to feel annoyed, right? Oh, I'm sorry. First, I want to tell you the other thing that confuses students is that the neutral stimulus changes names. That bouncing of the red hand. It's originally a neutral stimulus, but the moment, and this is exactly true, that the moment it starts to produce that unconditioned response, it stops being the neutral stimulus, and we change what we call it. Oh shoot, what is this? 5. I have no clue what to price this at. Let's try pricing it at 25, maybe? 1, 2, 3, 5. It stops being a neutral stimulus. It's not neutral anymore. The definition of neutral is it doesn't have a relationship with the unconditioned response. And so we change its name, and we change its name to the conditioned stimulus. And so again, that's another instance. We only have 3 things that are going on here. We have 2 stimuli and 1 response. And that's it when it comes to what we're considering in terms of this stimulus-response relationship. And that can get really confusing to students. And actually, I don't actually want to sell this if I don't have to, because I believe it's useful in enchantments or something. And now I have enough money to go buy some armor, and then I will die less. Because I don't think I'm wearing any armor right now. Hey, you! Sell me armor. This one. Make me die less and faster. Yes. And can you sell me... Can I wear this too? Right? This is fabric bandana, fabric chest plate. I don't have anything I need for chest plates. And then I have to decide what type of weapons I want. If I'm going to do swords and shields or big swords. I don't know. Well, I can't afford any of them anyway right now. So we'll decide another time. Did I automatically equip that? I didn't. There you go. Put that on. Excellent. So then, where do we have an example of operant conditioning? Classical conditioning is those reflexes responses. Operant conditioning is very easy to find. Why did I go back in to this dungeon if it means I'm going to have to fight again? I went back, and that's the operant, right? The behavior is going back into this dungeon. So I've identified an operant, the behavior that I'm trying to explain, or the behavior that is being modified. And I did that because of the expected consequence of that behavior. Ow. Already I'm having to... Oh, I didn't buy more potions. I'm in so much trouble. That was a mistake. Hey, Red Fighter. I'm glad you're still here. Yeah, I came in here with 1 potion. I'm not going to last long. So, why did I come back in here? Okay, I don't want to use that yet. I came back in here because I expected that something good was going to happen after I came in here. If the good thing happened without me having to come in here, if I could just get the good thing, it wouldn't then motivate me. It wouldn't then create a situation where I engaged in the behavior of coming in here. Why would I? Coming in here is an effortful behavior. It's one that I have to choose to engage in, and I wouldn't have any reason to do so. Operant conditioning has a lot to do with motivations for behaviors as well, although classical conditioning can also motivate behaviors. In this instance, I have a behavior coming into this dungeon, and it's being predicted or modified not by what came before, but by what comes after, at least my expectations of what comes after. And the reason I expect that these things are going to come after is because I have repeatedly paired coming in here with good things happening, right? So we still have the repeated pairings. We still know, or we still have seen that we have learned. We have to learn by having those experiences. Learning is changing our behavior through our experiences. So I have those experiences. They allow me to learn something about the world. But these experiences have to do with finding out, I hate you guys, what comes after I engage in a behavior, changing whether or not I engage in that behavior. This is going to be such a bad idea. Yep, I told you. Oh, wait. Let go. Leave. Did I get out? I did. Okay, good. I did it. I did it badly, but I did it. Alright. Yes, I need to go in there with potions. Let's go get some potions now before I can make that mistake and forget again, because that was silly. I don't even think I'm going to open the shop today because I don't have a lot of stuff to sell right now. Yeah, I just don't have. Thank you. There we go. Let's go put my stuff away at least. Silly, silly, silly Jedi. Silly. Alright. Yeah, that's not enough stuff to justify opening my shop. I'm gonna go do some more fighting. Daytime monsters. Let's see what these look like in the daytime. He said that they're less dangerous in the daytime. So, maybe that'll be nice. Alright. So, when I engage in a behavior where it is based on its consequence, the thing that happens after, that is operant conditioning. When it is based on what predicts the behavior, that is classical conditioning. So now let's find an example that combines both of them. And these guys don't really telegraph in the way that I want them to, so give me a second as I go and find them. And of course, anybody in the chat can ask questions, because that's what I'm here for. As I'm running through this, I'm trying to find somebody. There we go, okay. People who telegraph there. I'm going to kill everybody else in this room because I'm creating a situation that has both classical and operant conditioning kind of intentionally here. So, here's our... Hey, they steal my stuff! Okay, so there's another reflex response, right? I don't like when things steal my stuff. And when that guy punches me in the head, it steals my stuff. Oh, Crowdcraft, don't hold back on giving examples of things that complicate things. I love complications. You are absolutely welcome to give examples of complications. Subverting these sorts of things is absolutely a fun way to have games. So here's the red bouncy thing again. All right, I've already used the red bouncy example. Let's find a different bad guy while Cloudcraft talks about things that have been done in games that complicate the examples here, because I love things that complicate examples and that challenge the ability to think about these sorts of things in practice. That's kind of part of the fun, right? So, I was attacked by... Oh, wait, we've already heard the attack by a moving rock story. We don't need to hear about more moving rocks being attacking people. Alright, and that's the way to go to the right place. So I don't want to go to the right place just yet, so let's go to the wrong place. I don't remember how to pull up my map. Oh, my map's in the bottom right. Okay. There we go. This'll work. I gotta... Gotta get it so that guy's the last guy. So now we've got another example of classical conditioning. So let's watch this guy as he... we're using telegraphing of moves because that's a good example in this game of classical conditioning. And so we watch him telegraph his moves. He slightly lifts up his sword. And he actually lifts it up twice. Oh no, he doesn't lift it up twice. He only does that because I keep moving. So he's lifting up his sword, and then once he lifts up his sword, he strikes. And I've got the lifting up of the sword, and I've got the behavior of dodging. Right? So that's what we're going to talk about. The lifting up of the sword is a neutral stimulus when you first start playing the game. You have no clue what the lifting up of that sword means because he's bobbing all around. So he's already bobbing. The lifting up of the sword is just a subtle change in the way that he's being animated. And if you haven't played this game before, it doesn't mean anything to you. And then he lifts up his sword and you get hit. And specifically, he lifts up his sword and you lose HP. You lose HP and you get annoyed, or you lose HP and you get worried because you don't want to die. Right? So we have that same reflex response of losing HP and getting either annoyed or worried and having a response to it. And Cloudcraft, I'm going to finish up this example and then I'm going to listen to your complications, so feel free to keep adding them into the chat. And so, we have our neutral response of the lifting up of the sword, we have our unconditioned stimulus of losing HP, and our unconditioned response of getting worried or getting annoyed. And notice we can condition a whole bunch of things to the same unconditioned stimulus and unconditioned response. Then we have the behavior of dodging. The behavior of dodging is an operant. It is a random voluntary behavior. Notice I said that it sort of mixes up when we talk about classical and operant conditioning there. So what happens as I play the game is that I create a classically conditioned response after repeatedly encountering this enemy. Lifting up the sword, the neutral stimulus, precedes, comes before getting hit or losing HP, getting hit and losing HP, kind of happen simultaneously, and therefore being scared or annoyed, or otherwise having a response of sort of not liking that thing that just happened. And eventually, I have learned that the lifting up of the sword predicts losing HP, predicts getting annoyed or being scared, right? The moment that neutral stimulus of flipping up of the sword in and of itself makes me scared or worried, and we're going to stick with worried here, and you'll see why in a second. The moment that lifting up of the sword makes me worried, it is now a conditioned stimulus, and that feeling of worry is a conditioned response. Then I have the operant. And the operant, so now I'm feeling worried whenever he lifts up the sword. I'm worried because losing HP makes me worried, and lifting up the sword predicts losing HP. Then I have the behavior of dodging. Dodging is an operant. It's a voluntary behavior. And when I dodge, I eliminate the worry that I'm going to get out, that I'm going to get hit. And so I am dodging in response to him lifting the sword, and when that happens, I eliminate the worry of thinking I'm going to get hit. That is, I have removed an aversive stimulus. And what that's going to do is increase the frequency of me dodging in response to him lifting the sword. If you've watched our operant conditioning video, you may recognize this as negative reinforcement. It's negative, just quick refresher, it's negative because I've removed something. In this case, I've removed worry. And it's reinforcement because it is increasing the frequency of the behavior, in this case, dodging. There's another operant in this room, and that operant is killing this guy. Whoops, what did I just do? I don't know what I just did. That operant is killing this guy. So now I'm going to kill this guy. And you would wonder, okay, why did I kill this guy? That's the operant killing this guy. And what are the consequences? There's two. One of them, I get to open the chest. There's one consequence. And the other, it opened the door. By giving positive consequences, by giving these pleasant things after killing the guy, killing that final guy has been positively reinforced. I've added something that wasn't there before that's increased the frequency of engaging in that behavior. Now, before I switch rooms, I'm going to see the examples that Cloudcraft has been putting in the chat that complicate things. So some typical ones. The game has already conditioned you to respond to the video and audio cues that correspond with getting hit with the same feeling you have when you actually see that you've lost health. So when you're being conditioned to respond to the anticipating animations for enemy attacks, you're often learning via the conditioned stimulus of hitting the cues. Okay, so let's talk about that one for a second. Because I have been equating those and talking about how they're paired together, and you're absolutely right. So we have visual, in fact, there's shaking of the screen, but there are visual and audio cues that are associated with losing HP. I'm typically not looking at my HP bar when I know that I am losing HP. Instead, that in and of itself was a conditioned response, one that I've learned from years of playing video games. When I am new to playing video games, however, that has to be conditioned first for me to know this is me losing HP in order for me to be worried about getting hit in the first place. And so you're right, that is a conditioned response, and this is known as higher order conditioning. Higher order conditioning is when you take a set of stimulus and response that were previously learned so that in a different situation or in a different context had to have been learned. And in this situation, something is considered the unconditioned stimulus only because in this situation, it's already been learned. So, in this example, the example that Cloudcraft is giving, when I am in a combat and my controller shakes, that is a good indication that I've just been hit. How do I know that? Why do I make that association? Because when I have previously played video games, I have had an association. I have had repeated pairings of controller hit with the realization that I've lost HP. And so through those repeated pairings of controller hit, loss of HP, controller hit, loss of HP, or controller rumble, excuse me, controller rumble, loss of HP, controller rumble, loss of HP. Eventually I learned that controller rumble predicted the loss of HP. Yeah, I thought that sparkled. And therefore, when the controller rumbles, I now know that HP is being lost. Hey, a book. What's this? Let's take the book. That's nice. So I now associate that, and I can then use controller rumbling, right? So at one point, controller rumbling was... Come here. At one point, controller rumbling was an unconditioned stimulus because it hadn't been learned. But once it's learned, it can be used as... Or, excuse me, at one point, controller rumbling was a conditioned... Why are you sparkly? Oh, this dungeon seems like it may have been a peaceful place at one time. Now it is a graveyard full of stone soldiers waiting for scavenging. Oh, okay. Interesting. At one point, it was a neutral stimulus. And then it became... 2 sparkly rooms. Excellent. And then it became... unconditioned in different situations. So yes, absolutely, that is complicated, and it's known as higher order conditioning. I have 2 potions now. You know what? Let's try this again, because I didn't learn my lesson last time. You would think that the punishment I received last time would lead me to be a smarter person, but it did not. Because I wasn't adequately punished last time, because last time I was able to escape. Ow. Where am I? I've lost myself. There we go. I once was lost and now I'm found. Ow. Alright. You guys, come over here. Haha! I did it! Excellent. I am not going to do it a second time. That's it for me. Yep, and I should probably leave. I'm all sorts of full. We're gonna head out. So yes, that's known as higher order conditioning, and you can chain conditioning in that sort of way, all sorts of times. That's actually used. I'm gonna give an example as we go through and do some inventory management here. That is actually used. And I give this example in my classes, that's used in potty training quite a bit. So if you think about what has to be done in potty training, right, you're teaching the kid not to wet the bed, right? They're teaching the kid to wake up when they feel like they have to go to the bathroom so that they don't wake up covered in having gone to the bathroom instead, because that's aversive. But kids don't naturally wake up when they feel the sensation of having to go to the bathroom. That's not something that they automatically know to do, or that they automatically register that they should do. That's not something that their body is born prepared to do. And so what potty training is kind of learning that association. It's classically conditioning that association. And so what happens? What happens when kids are young, right? Well, what happens is they wet the bed, and being wet in the bed wakes them up because it's uncomfortable. And then eventually what happens is that, I want 4 more. They associate having gone to the bathroom, right? Because if you think about the sequence of events is I feel like I have to go to the bathroom, then I actually go to the bathroom, then I'm wet and uncomfortable and it wakes me up. So the wet and uncomfortable is the unconditioned stimulus. Waking up is the unconditioned response. Having actually gone to the bathroom is a previously neutral stimulus. And so what happens is eventually having actually gone to the bathroom is what wakes them up. We don't really notice this step in the chain because from a parent's perspective, they're waking up and they're covered in having gone to the bathroom regardless, right? So that's not really, stop it. That's not really something that from the outside looking in you notice in the chain, and it's not something the child notices in the chain. But it is a part of that chain that happens. There's a slight change in when they wake up relative to having gone to the bathroom. Then what happens is now you have the previously neutral stimulus of having gone to the bathroom leading to the reflex response of waking up. So now it is a conditioned stimulus that causes the child to wake up. Now, what predicts going to the bathroom? Needing to go to the bathroom, that sensation of needing to use the bathroom. So you repeatedly pair needing to pee and peeing, needing to pee and peeing. And they are quite unique. Oh yeah, I've read this. And eventually, needing to pee is what wakes you up, right? Because remember, needing to pee, peeing wakes you up. And eventually, the feeling of needing to pee is what wakes you up. And that's how we end up potty trained and not peeing the bed, and therefore waking up uncomfortable. And that process happens naturally. There are actually devices that can help you speed up that process that are alarms that can be placed. There's heat sensing alarms that are placed around, oh, I almost died, that are placed around a child's waist and are over the child's bladder, so they can notice when a child needs to go to the bathroom and will wake the child up when they need to go to the bathroom, thereby skipping some of the steps within higher order conditioning, because now you don't have to wet yourself to wake up, you just have to feel the sensation of needing to go to the bathroom, and there's far less cleanup associated. They are ridiculously expensive devices, but they can be used if you don't want to wait to engage in this higher order conditioning. And now, while I'm down here, I'm going to look at some of Cloudcraft's other responses. Cloudcraft has also said many games will make the stimulus that happens when you get hit naturally unpleasant on its own, so that it's both conditioned and unconditioned. Are you considering the rumble in and of itself unpleasant, or is there something else that you feel is unpleasant on its own that would be there? I don't know. I can't think of any examples of a game making getting hit unpleasant in and of itself, unless you're considering a rumble in my game, lost the word all of a sudden, in my controller as inherently unpleasant, which I don't find inherently unpleasant. I actually kind of like the vibration. I mean, I'm not like, ooh, yeah, let's get hit so I can have vibration. But I don't dislike vibrations. And like this game has multiple vibrations, and that's actually a bad idea if you're going to use vibration as a classically conditioned response. So your neutral stimulus should be distinctive from the other stimuli that are kind of surrounding it in the environment. You should be able to tell the difference between the stimulus that is doing the predicting and the things that are just around at all times. So if vibrations are happening for many reasons, well then it's not a good predictor or a good indicator that you've been hit or you're going to be hit. How do I open the map? There we go. I haven't gone everywhere yet. So I'm actually going to go down, and I apparently haven't gone all the way to the right before I go battle this guy. So you wouldn't want to have a game where vibrations are meaningful as a prediction of your... Oh, I didn't go there for a reason. As are predictive of whether or not you're going to die, and are used as something like letting you know that you need to use your pendant. That would create a situation where that stimulus is not as meaningful as you would want it to be. I can squish the bugs. Did you see that? I squished a spider. The tank. I can kill spiders in this game. Where'd that spider go? There was a spider in this room. I'm sorry. I got so excited because I don't like spiders, and I was just able to squish a spider on the ground in this game. It was very exciting to me. So Cloudcraft points out that Hollow Knight has a good example of getting hit produces 3 stimuli: a pause in the gameplay long enough to feel uncomfortable for almost all players, a sudden shift in the audio that dramatically changes the pitch and makes most audio very faint, and a visually chaotic effect. Briefly occludes the screen. Oh yeah, those are all unpleasant on their own. Those being unpleasant on their own are probably are not necessarily utilizing classical conditioning. Those sound like operant responses to make getting hit even more unpleasant, right? Even more aversive than just you lost HP. So you're even more motivated not to get hit because it is incredibly aversive. And that happens too. I was actually talking to my husband, to Papa Bear, about things like shifts in music and how we associate them with a bad thing is about to happen. And he was using them as an example of classical conditioning, and to some extent that is true. But it turns out that we also have natural responses to certain key signatures in music that are somewhat universal across culture. So it's not just, oh, in the US or, oh, in Western European countries we associate this type of music with this type of emotion. But instead, it is that humans in general associate certain key signatures in music with specific emotional responses, and will have those emotional responses to those key signatures fairly consistently. I think I'm in a situation where I can't actually take everything in this. These are worth 250. These are worth 3. But now what we're going to do is put these here. I think it's time for me to leave, isn't it? But I want more. You know what? I'm going to look for more valuable things and keep exchanging them. Oh, and put them in the mirror. Isn't the mirror a thing where I can get money for objects that I'm not going to keep? Come back to that. Let's test this. Take this whole pile and put it in this mirror here. And it gave money? Right? I hope. Let's see, how much money do I have? 48 plus 4. Okay. Excellent. So let's take cheap things and put them in the mirror. And let's then go get more expensive things and keep them because they're valuable. There we go. Excellent. Okay. If you delve into what key signature actually, there is a lot of interesting interaction between audio processing and psychology that you can predict with math. I don't know anything about the mathematical prediction of these things. So I would definitely be interested in hearing more about that, Cloudcraft, because I don't really know the math of it so much as simply the fact of the cross-cultural implications or the cross-cultural research that suggests that our responses to music, because there's a lot of cross-cultural variation in music, so I was very interested in the fact that there was cross-cultural consistency in our response to key signature is what I was aware of. So the mathematical prediction of our responses to music is actually very fascinating to me. I wonder, that makes me wonder if my husband knows somewhat about that. I'm not certain he would, but he would probably understand the math in much greater depth than I would, given his background in mathematics and my lack of background in mathematics. I mean, I didn't not do math. You have to have a good amount of statistics for a psychology degree, but all right, it's time to stop messing around in this dungeon, because clearly I don't have the space for the things that I'm picking up. Oh no, stop that. So let's see. This is going to be the last set of things that I bring in here. And I've got to bring them in such a way that they don't destroy other things. Okay, now. I'm not leaving my book behind. That would be a mistake. I guess you're getting sold? There we go. Alright, let's skedaddle from here. Cloudcraft says they're not great at responding it because we're describing it, excuse me, because there's a lot of different layers of how you examine the nature of a sound with musical theory. So yeah, I wouldn't be either, to be honest, and it would probably take me quite a bit because I don't know the music theory. So I have this sort of double whammy of not knowing the music theory and not knowing the mathematics behind it. But it is kind of a very fascinating thing to consider how much human behavior and psychology, to be honest, we can describe with mathematical models. All right, and now we're in a position where we can decide what type of weapon we want to work with. I tend to like either swords or gloves. I like to get up close and personal with things, but I feel like I ought to have a secondary weapon of a sort. And of course, I sold all my sticks. So that's the one I've been using. I wonder if I try this one. It makes me slower, but I have armor that's making me faster. Or do I do punchies? Let's try the big sword. I'm gonna need the green stuff to do that, so I'll get more of that next time. Alright, so I think I think I finished up the comparisons that I wanted to make between classical and operant conditioning, with classical conditioning really involving the prediction of a response or a set of behaviors and that reflex response, whereas operant conditioning is talking about a voluntary behavior and how it is modified by the consequences of that voluntary behavior. I didn't see any questions about that within the comments or anything that indicated that I missed something there. But if you have questions that you would like to leave in the comments, you can absolutely do that on this video or the previous video. Or you can check out some more of our videos on psychology and video games. I'll link to the video that I made in Hades, where I talk about operant conditioning in much more detail here, but also other videos where I talk about psychology and video games. And if you want to get more content on psychology and video games, you guys all know what to do in terms of liking and subscribing and all of that stuff. I don't need to tell you all about that. And for those of you in the chat, stick around. I am going to check in with Papa Bear, see what we're up to, and whether or not I'm going to be playing an additional game. So stay tuned.